Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle.
And Mushtaq Ali. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
And we want to thank you for joining us, whether you're here live or watching on the replay. You are entirely welcome, and we are happy to have you. And we need to do our little YouTube spiel, which means you know the drill, the whole like, comment, subscribe thing. And share our videos and even sign up for a one-on-one with us if you like. Just send us an email or hit us up on Facebook and you'll be able to work with us privately, as well as, whether you want to chat with us on the comments or on Facebook via email. We are here and we are happy to connect, circumstances permitting, always, as we are two human beings humaning in a complex world. Anything else, Mushtaq?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I would like to say once again, if you feel up for it, if this speaks to you, pray for Palestine and Israel. We said it last week. Someone gave us a
Upset
little
some
bit of
people. Yeah.
pushback on that, so I am saying it again because we stand by that.
Yeah. If you don't like us praying for both of them, fuck you.
Amen. Amin. Alhamdulillah. All right. So we are continuing our discussion from last week. This is our part 2 of anxiety. So, where should we begin this week?
Um, well, let's do a brief how's everybody doing? Any
Yeah.
questions left over from last week?
Yeah, and we can reiterate what we mean when we talk about anxiety as well. But if you've had any questions that have been chewing at you this week, please feel free to ask.
And there was crickets.
Well, it was a big topic, and I understand. So, why don't we start first of all, Mushtaq, with what do we mean when we use the word anxiety?
What do we mean when we use the word anxiety, Noor?
We are not talking necessarily about the way that we use the term in contemporary, you know, verbal and online contexts where we're talking about that itchy, uncomfortable. I mean, it varies, right? From the extreme of panic attacks all the way down to just like, ooh, I'm gonna not think about that thing that makes me uncomfortable. So there's this factor of avoidance. And that is actually relevant to how we want to talk about anxiety. Zainab's here. We are talking about something existential. That means that goes beyond the psychology of the machine, as we've talked about it constantly for the past few years. And as we know, when we talk about the machine, we are talking about the mechanical ego. So those are the things that we do based on our programming, essentially. The things that we do that we've been socialized to do, that we've been traumatized into doing sometimes. The way that our imprinting has been established at pivotal points in our maturation process from infant to adult. So things like that we are talking about as being part of the psychology of the machine. But we also have this consciousness that is actually deeper than the psychology of the machine. And the anxiety we're talking about when we talk about existential anxiety has to do with this consciousness behind the machine, or that flows through the machine. So I think I'm going to end there, Mushtaq. And what have I left out? What can we expand on?
Well, let's start out with talking about the anxiety of the machine and understanding that we don't mean to diminish that. It's very serious. The anxiety of the machine can be crippling at times.
Ask us how we know.
Yeah, been there, done that. Got the t-shirt. Now, we're interested in the anxiety of the machine because it's something that needs to be dealt with. We don't particularly deal with that, but we know lots of people who do. As a matter of fact, uh, Nor I'm thinking that we need to finally get together and have an interview with Arden because she's somebody who deals with this and does it really well.
Sure.
So make a note and I will bother her until she agrees or unfriends me or something.
All right, fair enough. I am making a note. We will discuss.
Yeah, because that's important. Now, that needs to be dealt with. Everybody has at least a little bit of this uh, in their makeup. And that's where we get into the idea of dealing with the chief feature. Because whatever your chief feature is, that's where your anxiety will lay. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. We touched on that a fair bit last time. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the anxiety of essence. And that has to do with meaning. That has to do with uh, really deep stuff. And um, there's an octave of essential anxiety. And I'm pulling it up right now. So,
As Mushtak gets his full screen ready.
oh, my full screen is ready. I'm not going to show them the Enneagram just yet. I'm just going to give them a list and we're going to talk about them a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah, sure.
So,
Sure.
write these down or otherwise record them in your minds. Birth, evil, nihilism, as we say down south, freedom, death, individuality, and guilt.
I will put them in the chat because
Put them in the
Mushtak,
chat.
you went quite fast on that. That's okay. It will be in the chat. And for those of you watching on the replay, feel free to hit the 30-second back button. So,
Yes. And we're going to mention them.
yeah.
So, the first on this list, and this is not how you arrange it on the Enneagram. This is just a random list, not in any particular order, except for maybe birth. So, Noor, what is the anxiety of birth in the essential self?
I think about this in terms of, you know, a kind of fear of the fact that we move through growing stages throughout life. We go through being born again and again and again, being remade again and again and again. So this means change is an inherent part of the process. Growth is an inherent part of the process. And this can give us anxiety. So many of us experience the fear of change. And that can be something that propels us forward or holds us back, depending on our attitude in reference to this anxiety of birth.
Yeah. So, of course, I mean, Leonard Orr, for those of you who remember people like that, made a fortune dealing with people's birth traumas or what he thought of as people's birth traumas. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the anxiety produced when you realize that your life is going to change irrevocably, completely, whether you want it to or not. The contractions are coming. You're getting out into the world, and you can't go, no, I'm not going to go hold on to your mother's liver or something. It's not going to happen.
And there's a degree of pain involved often
Yes, there
with
is always
change.
a degree of pain involved.
Letting go of the familiar and the safe and the comfortable is, yeah, as you say, pretty much inherently painful,
Yeah.
even
This
when
is
it's unpleasant.
this is why people become junkies. Opiates are a substance that literally put you back in the womb. You get that nice, floaty, warm sensation. I remember the first time I experienced that, kidney stones, right? Doctor comes in and says, have some morphine. Next thing you know, life is good. So, being unable to cope with the anxiety of birth, with the anxiety of necessary emergence from one state to another, will lead you to narcotization in one form or another.
There, got it in the chat.
So the second one, tell us about evil, Noor. I mean,
Evil.
evil should be on everybody's mind right about now.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's almost harder for me to talk about right now because it feels oppressive. So, the anxiety of evil is not only our fear of quote unquote committing evil, but also our fear of, I think you're gonna have to help me with this one. This one I had I
Yeah.
had, yeah.
Evil exists. Evil is not a construct. Evil is real. Now, I like to quote Terry Pratchett, who pointed out that sin and evil are treating human beings, sentient beings, including yourself, as if you were an object.
Yeah, I mean, another word I've seen used for it is inconsiderateness. And again,
Yeah, that's
that
such a mild
includes,
term for,
yeah. But it's this sense of not taking the other into consideration in a meaningful, actualizing way.
yeah. Evil is basically acting with complete and utter disregard for the inwardness of the other. And we're seeing that right now. I mean, Hamas decides, oh, we need to free the people. So they go and they kill a bunch of strangers, right? Not military, just random people. Israel goes, oh, we must respond. And they kill a bunch of random people. Nobody is noticing that the people that you are killing have meaning. These are lives that will never, ever be lived again. Whatever meaning they had in the world has been taken away. And that's evil. And you can argue about chicken and egg it all day long, going back to um, whenever, and it's still evil. Doesn't matter who started it, doesn't matter who daddy likes best, doesn't matter who inherited and who got disinherited 4,000 years ago. What matters is that the inwardness of every one of these people was taken away, and that's evil.
Irreplaceably.
Yeah. And you don't have to end it. You can just wound someone's inwardness. Think about the little old lady walking down the street. Somebody runs up, grabs her handbag and knocks her down and runs off. Her life is inevitably changed by that, and not for the better. There's a whole class of things that you do to people or to yourself that need to be classified as evil. And evil exists in the world. And we must come to grips with that and find a way to cope with it.
Bonnie says, can we say that evil correlates to sleep state of people? Like people who aren't aware and awake?
Most of the time, there's a weird thing though, and we'll get to that when we get to freedom. And Khalil has a question too. So hold on to that thought because we will circle around back to it.
All right, so Khalil, how about you?
Yeah, I have more of a comment about evil. I would say there's a very subtle but important step for the objectification of others, and that's objectification in general, which entails projecting your identity into things, especially land, real estate, property, saying this is my land, belongs to me because it is me. And then the next step in objectification proceeds to people. So because you're an object to me, I will accept you or not accept you on my land and being part of my religion. So we go about projecting ourselves into objects, and that culminates in projecting ourselves ultimately into others, thinking we can control them, and that's where that evil sort of mounts up and culminates.
Yeah, I would love to disagree with you, but you're right. So I can't. Damn it. No philosophical argument yet.
Khalil is amused. So, I think it's also timely then to talk about nihilism, right?
Yes.
Nihilism. So,
Nihilism.
nihilism.
Got to say it right.
um, so we've all heard that saying, when you stare into the abyss stares back.
Or the abyss makes faces at you.
Yes, but that is critical to this aspect of anxiety on this essential plane. And by that, I mean, first of all, we have this sense of anxiety about nothingness. What is behind all of the objects that we engage with and experience every day? Underlying that, some people can say, there is nothing. And what does it mean if we embrace that? For some people, that's a terrifying thought.
For most people, that's a terrifying thought.
Yes, but it's also got the corollary behind it that there is a peace in that as well.
Yeah, because nihilism has to do with nothingness, and it also has to do with meaninglessness.
Yeah.
There is no meaning. There is nothing.
Right. Yeah. And, we talk about human beings being the meaning making entities in the universe. And this touches in on this anxiety of nihilism. Like, that's a hell of a lot of responsibility.
As my old buddy Judd likes to point out, it's not death that people fear, it's non-existence that people fear.
Mm-hmm.
And nihilism is looking right in the face of non-existence.
Yep. And ironically, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
Yes. Huh. Is there anything we need to add about nihilism?
Ah!
I mean, this is certainly one of those moments where it's easy to be swallowed up in that. If you're already grappling and struggling with the anxiety that emerges around evil, nihilism and the anxieties surrounding that often does follow.
Yep. So then we get to freedom. And freedom is interesting because freedom and evil are related. Do you know what you call a consciousness that is completely free? Any ideas? A consciousness that is completely free. You call it a psychopath.
Or psychopathic. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Choiceless awareness, said Bonnie. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
A psychopath experiences complete freedom and at the same time views the other as object. This is not hypothetical. I spent over a decade working in the locked wards of the psychiatric hospitals of California. And I spent a lot of time with some serious psychopaths, axe murderer kind of psychopaths. Not your nice psychopath, but your really scary psychopath. And none of them experienced the other as anything other than an object that was either a benefit to them or in their way.
so there's no guardrails,
Yep.
no boundaries, no limitations.
Now, does this mean that the experience of freedom makes you a psychopath? No. But this is one of two outcomes. Basically, if you experience complete freedom, you are either going to be the Buddha or Jack the Ripper. Don't necessarily have to kill anybody. A lot of psychopaths never commit a crime, per se. So then we get to death.
Death.
Tell
So
us
we,
about death, Noor.
yeah, I mean, we've talked about birth, right? Birth is about growth, and being reborn and change and expansion, getting out of your comfort zone, all of those things. Death is like the other side of that coin. It's about decay, it's about disintegration, it's about the ending of things as opposed to the beginning of things. It's about losing what has been gained. It's about all of those things that involve contraction as opposed to expansion. And So often we see lots of anxiety around that for many, many people because,
Yeah, this is the other place of complete narcotization.
yeah, I mean, we talked last week about the denial of anxiety, and here is where that shows up, often the most covertly, we should say.
Yeah, remember, Mr. Gurdjieff said that one of the things that keeps people stuck is their inability to realize their own mortality, that they are going to die and they do not have all the time in the world.
Yeah, and that's in the big picture sense, but parts of our lives are dying and being reborn all the time. Both of those parts are necessary, and you cannot have one without the other. But in the end, yes, we all must grapple with the reality of our lives ending, of that being the end of our personality.
Yep. And the avoidance of this keeps us stuck in the neuroses of the machine. If you want to be healthy, you need to face your own death. And I'm not talking about metaphorically. I'm talking about you're going to die. And you need to face that. And act accordingly.
And that's where the magic happens,
Yep.
acting accordingly.
Then we
So,
get to, yes, Nora?
individuality. What do we want to hone in on with this aspect of anxiety, Mushtaq? Because this is a big, big subject.
Yep. And the reality is, you are an I. You are an individual. You can experience the world as an individual. You're designed to experience the world as an individual. And yes, you can experience the world also as a unity. I mean, bees experience the world as a unity, probably. But human beings get to experience the world as individuals, as an I, as an individual inwardness. And this is incredibly important to our development and scary as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Expound for us, Noor.
Well, again, if we're going to talk about being individuals, there's a certain amount of personal accountability and self responsibility that comes with that. So we're incorporating freedom into this as well. How do we want our individual self to show up in the world? We have so much room for shaping that individuality that it can be overwhelming. And at the same time, we can become so identified with how we've manifested that individuality that we get stuck there and we seemingly have no flexibility at all. So, this is a balance of both of those extremes, and we are constantly having to navigate between them.
Yeah. And our individuality is incredibly important to our freedom, which we will get to in a bit as well. And last, but definitely not least, tell us
Guilt.
about the guilt of essence, Noor.
Ah, so guilt is related in that it has to do with how we show up or don't in the world and how satisfied we are with that or aren't. So if you have a sense of yourself that you're supposed to be successful in such and such way or behave in such and such way, and you see that you are not, you are likely to feel guilt about that if those are things that are valuable to you.
And often that's just the guilt of the machine. That's just
Most
the
often,
anxiety of the
yes.
machine.
The
I am
things,
not a doctor. My parents expected me to
yeah.
be a doctor. I'm supposed to be a doctor and I'm not a doctor. And then you get the anxiety of the machine, which is different than my life. My meaning in my life is to create art, and I'm not doing that. I'm doing medicine instead.
Mm-hmm. That sense of what am I doing? How did I end up here? What am I going to do? Something is wrong. Yeah, so that can be externally imposed or that can be something internal. And that depends on whether it's coming from the essence or from the machine. Yes.
Yeah. And what we are concerned with this evening is the essence saying, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Let me nag you about that. And that's where you get the guilt of essence.
Yeah, I kind of think about what the image that comes to my mind is in the past we talked about like the sand grain inside of a
Oyster.
oyster that forms a pearl, right? That thing that chafes and reminds you that there's something important you should be doing. And it's not important just because your mom said so. It's important because there's something in you that craves it and feels a pull towards that thing. And the more you ignore it, the more frustrated you get.
Yep, it's true. All right. Any questions before we move on to the next phase of this?
Osama, what are you thinking about?
Um, I'm laughing because it's a lot. Like all these seven, and like every time you were describing something, I'm like, wait a second, like, are you talking to me? Like, what, what's going on?
And the answer is yes, we are.
Yeah, I know that. And it's a lot. At the same time, it's super it's important for the work and every yeah, all of them. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Um, starting with birth, this irrevocable change and reaching, like even just remembering certain points in my life where I'm like, okay, I know what's happening. And then this anxiety, now I would call it anxiety, this anxiousness that comes and takes over the body. And it's like, whoo, um, before that step or as it's happening, and I'm observing that, um, and how that being connected to death, as mentioned, something has to die in order for something to to be born again. For some reason, I don't know what, maybe that's something that I gotta think about, is the first time that you shared the list, surrender, the word surrender came to mind. And I don't know if that's helpful.
Yes, we will see where that fits in.
Yeah,
Okay.
that does have a home in all this. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna stop you. This is fire. Like, yeah, this is amazing. Yeah.
Thanks, Osama. So we have a couple of thoughts. Alka asks, can it be guilt of not being able to meditate or do practices because we were too busy?
That would be the guilt of the machine. That is mechanical. That's not existential guilt.
Yep.
You notice how there's the because there? That tells you. If you just say, I feel a certain amount of guilt, like I'm denying myself because I'm not meditating as much, without excuses, that could be guilt of essence. And Bonnie has a question.
Yeah. Go for it.
Hi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So can we say that it actually boils down to the anxiety of essence? It boils down to the core feature that you just spoke about. If we figured out the core essence that we have to work against, then we can address that anxiety of essence. Is that so?
More or less. If you understand your chief feature, then that's going to tell you where most of your anxieties are going to be gathering about. Both the anxieties of the machine and the anxieties of essence are going to be affected by the chief feature. The chief feature is built out of this stuff. So yes, you are not inaccurate in that. And
Okay, so
understanding your chief feature will help you to know what it is you need to deal with.
right. So how do we understand that core feature?
That requires work. That requires a lot of work. I'm working on a class for exactly that right now. And other than that, if you really want to work on your chief feature, my advice is get together with Nora or myself for some one-on-one sessions, and we will work it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what I've been planning. I'll book a session with you guys.
All right, great.
Good.
Looking forward to it. Whoever you want to work with is fine. We'll talk more about that. Thanks, Bonnie. Any other questions or thoughts so far? Because this is pretty big stuff. Let's put it that way. So I liked how Osama was laughing because it is a lot. It's a lot to take in. And I agree. James, you look pensive. What are you thinking about? And then Zainab, sorry about that, Zainab.
Oh, Zainab can go first.
Okay, sure. Go for it, Zainab.
So if we have the grace, do we also have the will somewhere here?
Yes.
So Zainab's talking about in any given process, we have to inject our will basically and then allow for grace. So, yes, like anything else, anxiety is a process, and we're going to be delving into that a bit more too. All right. Yeah, James, I'm gonna pick on you. What are you thinking about?
That's fine. Couple of things. Probably when I estimate I was being like 6 or 7 years old. That's when death, the reality that I was going to die, first hit me savagely, like really bang. Not an abstract thought. I'm going to die. And that was, scary.
Mm.
But is that simply the machine freaking out for biosurvival reasons, or is that some kind of deeper essence thing, or is it a blend?
It's probably both.
Yeah. Okay. Because that stayed with me. That didn't just go away.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing was just more of a technical, really rewinding back to the question of psychopaths. Would it be possible for a fully fledged psychopath to experience any kind of essence guilt, any sense that they were wasting their deeper potentials? Because
Not in
my
my
view is,
experience.
yeah, that's what I wondered, because my impression has always been that they don't have access to that broader horizon of
Yeah,
considerations.
I consider the entire area of psychopathology to be broken consciousness. It's like nobody here has a broken consciousness. As my old philosophy professor used to say, most people are not psychologically broken, they're merely philosophically ignorant. And there's a lot of truth to that. If you try and treat philosophical ignorance with psychiatric meds, it ain't gonna work.
Mm-mm.
And vice versa. You cannot treat a broken consciousness with philosophy. So the short answer is, as far as I can tell, and smarter people than me have been trying to figure out what to do with this kind of consciousness for a lot longer than I've been alive. It can't be fixed. We don't know how to fix it.
And I would follow with a bit more hair splitting. But it seems to me that narcissistic people can still have temporary states. But could a psychopath ever have a temporary state, a temporary insight, or is it
Not that I've
just
noticed.
right?
And that's the thing,
Okay.
a narcissist. So, as we used to say, not all narcissists are psychopaths, but all psychopaths are narcissists.
Yeah.
And narcissist, psychopath, sociopath are terms that are not even used in psychiatric thought
Yeah,
anymore.
they're
Now they have disorders that you can put in the DSM-5.
Yeah.
yep, they're
But
kind of anachronisms now,
yeah,
but
but the thing is that a psychopath is not psychologically ill. They aren't. They don't hallucinate most of the time. Well, sometimes they do, but they can tell right from wrong. They know that killing people is wrong as this sort of obscure concept, just a generalization. But they don't feel like they're doing wrong if they kill somebody because they have a reason. And their reason is good. That person was in their way or some such. And it's a weird damn thing. I think that the whole psychopathy sort of thing is a divergent human evolution. We're actually seeing the emergence of a new subspecies. Mostly we find them in places like Washington, Downing Street.
Is that new, or has that always been the
C-suites.
case?
I think that it is much more intense. I think we select more and more for sociopaths and psychopaths within politics. And Khalil?
Yeah, Khalil says, it depends on how you define, quote, philosophy, unquote. Analytic philosophy, no. Certain kinds of noetic philosophy, yes. He's talking about,
Yes.
being philosophically literate or ignorant,
Or
basically.
whether philosophy can actually help in one's
Ah,
brokenness.
Or broken
Yes.
thank you for
consciousness.
clarifying. Yes, that's important. Yes,
Yeah. That's
indeed.
something that we could discuss for hours and probably should one day. Though probably not here because everybody else would be bored. Nor would be rolling her eyes at us.
I would be, yes. Bonnie says, something to be noticed about psychopaths that I have observed is that they bring about a huge change in the world.
Often, very frequently. Yeah. Like I said, not all psychopaths are axe murderers. Some of them build electric cars.
Well, I would say most of them are not axe murderers. Plenty of high functioning folks out there.
Yeah.
And they are not afraid to get things done. And there is something weird, it's admirable in its way.
Yeah, you just don't want to be in their way.
Yes.
So,
Yes,
Yes.
Bonnie. We do need to move on from this psychopathy thing too.
sure. So just I wanted to comment on something. So can we really compare a psychopath to a Buddha?
You can compare anything to anything. But there's a difference, and we're going to touch on that. But I will tell you that the difference between a psychopath and a Buddha is that the awakened person chooses their limits. They experience absolute freedom, and they choose to have limits. That's
So,
yeah.
I mean, could then a person deemed a psychopath? Yeah, they could exhibit that. They choose their limits. They say, "I'm not going to do that."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If only it were that simple. Anyway.
Anyways, moving on. So one thing I want to reiterate from last week is that we talked about how anxiety in and of itself is not a bad thing. And I think that's important because what we're talking about, or what we're trying to get at, is that you have this anxiety that becomes a driving force. It is a driving force. It is this spot between opposites in your life, between being an individual and being part of a collective, being someone who thinks for themselves and takes other people and their needs into consideration. Think of all the opposites that take place in a human life, and think about how balancing those opposites in your own life can be a bit of a tightrope walk and can cause you some anxiety. That is human. That is part of the human experience. It's supposed to be that way because we are always in flux. We are always walking that tightrope.
Yep. Anxiety is revelatory.
Yes. And motivating.
Especially the anxiety of essence.
That's what we're getting at, yes. Whereas the anxiety of the machine is kind of like a warped sense of that. It's the kind that you're like, if you feel trapped by, you feel dominated by, you feel that it rules you and controls you, as opposed to you being able to use it as a way to move forward through your life.
So with that being said, let's take a look at the Enneagram of the anxiety of essence. And I will share my screen with you. Let me know when you all can see it.
We can see it.
Okay. So you notice that this is not in the same order that we read them off. It was a random order that we read them off.
Do you want to make it full screen?
I
think it's going to be in that left hand. Yeah, that's good enough.
Good enough. I like it like this, because that way I can still stare at you guys. So.
We have here an Enneagram.
And we have here all of this stuff put on it with a couple of things. Anxiety of essence is up here at the 0-9. This is the entering shock, where you notice that the anxiety that you're having is not because your mother wouldn't give you a puppy when you were 5, but something deeper. Here we have the first anxiety, which is birth. And you'll notice the moving lines connect it with death and freedom. Birth is usually what we get to cope with in the beginning. Things change, things are different. We move through different cycles. We are always dying and being reborn. We are emerging. You know, we go from the quiet childhood to having to go to school. We graduate from one level of schooling to another. Finally, we get kicked out of the nest, and here we are in the great wide world, wishing that we could crawl back into the womb.
Brr, so
Yeah.
cold, so alone.
We look at that, and then we look at the next one, individuality. That's placed here at the, so remember, this is preparation, this is action, this is shock. Birth is your prep point. Individuality, confronting yourself as an individual, beginning to individuate, as the Jungians say, becomes a very necessary thing after a birth experience. You have to individuate from that birth. Now, this is connected also to freedom, and you look back over here and you see something that we haven't mentioned, ground. Ground is incredibly important. It is the foundation upon which you build yourself. What is your ground? We're not talking about grounding as if you were earthing an electrical charge. We're talking about, this is where I stand. This is where I find my balance.
The thing that makes you feel some kind of existential security in the world. Even when everything's going to shit, you have this ground underlying it all that allows you to have
and
a
you could be
modicum of
grounded
safety
in any of these things.
Yeah. Yep.
So the first conscious shock is here at nihilism.
So this is point 3.
This is point 3, and this is your very first experience of the utter meaningless void that is existence. Usually happens when you're about 14. You start wearing all black, listening to Velvet Underground, you know. I just dated myself, huh?
So, you know, reading Colin Wilson, says Khalil.
Yeah, reading Colin Wilson.
Yep.
Yeah, reading The Mind Parasite 15 times in the first year that you own the book. It's like you read that and you go, there's something to this. I'm not sure what it is, but I know there's something to this.
For me, it was The Outsider, but same thing.
Yeah, The Outsider was good, but I like the Lovecraftian aspect to philosophy. But I have to say, it was that book that introduced me to Husserl, which is something that changed my life. But anyway,
Anyways,
if we
Husserl
can
can
get
wait
past,
another day.
yeah, if we can get past the shock of staring into the void, then we get to freedom. You notice that freedom is also connected to individuality and birth. This is where you realize that in order to be free, you have to choose. Individuality is about choosing your limitations. It calls upon the denying force.
Yeah,
Saying
there's
this, not that.
right. No, as opposed to inviting in. Yes, as he says, not this, not that. I want this, but not that.
Yeah. So realizing your freedom is connected to your individuality. And again, you are birthing yourself. So these two moving lines connects up.
Because as they say, a decision, that's the death of a choice in favor of another option. So from
Yeah.
every death comes a birth.
Then, of course, here we have the equator. And when we cross the equator from freedom to evil, it's something that you can't come back from. You can't recover from that. Because this is the experience of, yes, there is evil in the world. The evil is not inside me, it's outside me. And it doesn't listen to me when I tell it to stop. That's the thing about evil, is it doesn't listen to you. Which is why evil is connected with death rather than life.
And it's also at the dark night of the soul point too.
Yeah, the area of most work. And coping with evil is one of the things that we have to work on a lot. And again, it connects up to ground, because evil will make your ground shake. Evil will question your ground. Evil will try and force you off your ground, so that you end up groundless again, and you lose your individuality into the evil. Then we get to the second conscious shock, which is guilt. Oh my God, I am not fulfilling my potential. I am not living my meaning. This all goes back to meaning. Your meaning is what thumbs its nose at nihilism. The void goes, ha, nothing means anything. And you go, ha ha, I say this means that. And if you don't like it, go get stuffed. So guilt in this place is informing you of where you need to work to actualize your meaning. And then we get to death. Just when you think you're going to get your act together, you die.
Oops.
Happens every damn time. Now, death is connected with evil in a lot of ways. At least on a personal level, we experience death as being completely ruthless. But at the same time, you notice it's also connected to birth.
Mm.
And then we finally get to this point 8, which is ground again. Ground is what allows us to be us. and it's what allows us to resist evil. And it's the purpose of all of this, to find your ground and stand on it, whatever that might look like for you. And nobody can tell you what it is. And anybody who says that they can tell you what your ground is and what your meaning is trying to sell you something. Paraphrase Princess Bride a little bit. So there you have how you would look at the octave of anxiety of essence on an Enneagram and use it to contemplate your own life. Ask yourself, where am I in the flow of this? What is most important to me? Which of these is most meaningful to me? So, what's your favorite anxiety?
Well, we have a question from Zainab while you all think about that.
Okay, let me get rid of this so I can see what's going on.
Nancy unfortunately had to escape because she's not feeling good.
Oh,
But if she watches the replay, I hope she knows that we wish her well. And that she feels better. Zainab asks, is guilt the affirming force?
could be. Because guilt is often, I should be doing something.
Bonnie says she had the same question. Okay.
So we'll say tentatively yes. We do not have definitive answers for this because the ancient sages were silent about this. So when it comes right down to it, your guess is as good as mine. And we are figuring this out together.
Cutting edge shit right here.
Yeah. So everybody from here on out is officially correct. Even if you disagree with each other, especially if you disagree with each other.
So,
has a question, and Yusuf has a question.
Yes, Bonnie says this is very, very interesting. So, Osama, what do you say?
Yeah, question, a comment and a question. Well, I guess maybe two questions. Guilt, it reminds me of النفس اللوامة.
Yes.
So that's how, even within myself, it feels like that's the manifestation of it, is from that stage of the, well, I don't know, self-blaming, I don't know if that's the right translation of it, or guilt self, but I don't know if that's good.
It's interesting because I think that you could overlay each of these onto the 7 levels of nafs.
So that's the Sufi methodology for addressing the unconstriction of the ego, is one way we could put it. How
I have not done this yet, but I think that you may be on to something.
So we'll have to chew on that.
Yeah, because it does seem like internally that's how it might show up. Another question is, can you speak a little more about ground, and how can one tell the difference between a conditioned ground, or what might be thought as, oh, this is my ground, rather than an essential essence ground that is rooted in meaning?
Ground in this sense cannot be taken away from you, no matter how hard somebody tries. You can surrender it probably, but it can't be taken from you. So ground has nothing to do with the dirt that you're standing on, for instance. And Nora and I live in a nice house. It could be taken away from us tomorrow. That's not our ground. So finding that which is, in a certain sense, immutable. Does that make sense?
So if, I guess my question is, okay, if I tell myself and I have that conversation to say, okay, my ground is this experience of the one living being, how much of that is based off of conditions of experience in the world rather than an actual rooted in truly my essence, meaning something that's truly coming from within rather than something that is projected from outside inwardly.
That's something only you can answer, Matt.
That's great.
And Bonnie has a very important message. Can we build our own ground? And the answer is yes. As a matter of fact, you must build your own ground. But let me get to Yusuf first, and then I'll get back to this.
Yusuf, where'd you go?
Put my hand down, but forgot to unmute. But yeah, this is helpful, especially like looking back at life and how we go through the stages. I was kind of shocked to hear you say that evil is something that is outside and not within.
Well, you can be evil, but evil exists whether you decide to be evil or not.
Sure. I guess, but as far as seeing it, like whenever you're looking at this stuff, it's something that I have seen within myself to a lesser degree than, a much lesser degree than we're talking about the evils of the world, but something that you can see within yourself.
Oh, yeah. We're all capable of evil. All you have to do is forget that that other person is another person. And move towards your desires with no consideration of their inwardness. We as guys were raised to do that. Think about that for a second. So is that helpful?
A little. I think it's maybe I was just asking more of a clarification question more than anything.
Yeah.
The one that I honestly struggle with the most, and looking back, the one that I have struggled with the most is individuality. I think, and especially when it comes to things like identity, I think I got so there's multiple points. I had a big part which was struggling with the identity of religion, was very frustrating to me. Coming more to terms with the age of 27, and the other one is seeing individuality as ego, like seeing yourself, not wanting to not wanting to obsess over my individuality or my person or my identity, because I'm like I'm identifying it as egoic and wanting to, and seeing, oh, that's something that is wrong, or the wrong way to see things. So trying to like almost shut down my individuality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is interesting. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we all part of becoming an adult, we talk about that in this group, like becoming an adult is something that we are all called to do, and not all of us ultimately achieve, unfortunately. But part and parcel of becoming an adult is embracing that you are an individual, whether you like it or not. How you shape that out, how you build that out, ultimately is on you, on each of us. But it has to be done. What else has come up that I wanted to reflect on a little bit? I think when it comes to evil, there is, when we think about the evil within, quote unquote, human beings have fleeting thoughts about random, disgusting, crazy shit. We have fantasies about those things when we're angry, perhaps. All of those things are normal, and I feel that they are kind of part of the human experience of tasting all the possibilities that are open to us. It is another thing entirely to move forward and treat those as appropriate to bring into consensual reality and into the realm of behavior and living them out, or even getting stuck on them. Like, if you notice you're fantasizing about hurting puppies all the time consistently, you probably want to go speak to someone about that. But if we're just having flashes of like, fuck that guy, I wish I could just like plow into his car right now, such an asshole, like just that kind of thing, those flashes, you just kind of have to take those in stride and say, wow, that was a weird thought, we are not doing that today, and move on. Or if you want to imagine, like, because horrible thing to think about, that your parent abused you and you need some way to process that inside of you as an adult, looking back on that experience, and you envision being able to fight back, being able to react to that, there's something that is arguably healing in that. But you do have to remember that that is a therapeutic scenario playing out in your own head, and that it is the projection of objectified concepts around who that parent was to you, what they did to you, what your experience was at that time. So when we talk about evil, I want to make sure that we're not conflating it with these experiences of being human, that we should not be beating ourselves up for. So I hope that helps too. All right. Anything else?
So Bonnie was asking about, can you build your own ground? And my reply was, yes, you must. But
Yes.
it's not, a ground is more than situational. Your ground is the part of you that would say, I can rejoice in whatever situation I have. It's not the doing of it, it's the place where that comes from. That's a little obscure, but best I can do.
I think there can be something esoteric about ground, right? It is meant to be found
Yeah, and
inside of us
it is,
as opposed to
yeah.
outside of us, like a material object or whatever. I think things outside of us can become symbols for that ground within, perhaps, but are not to be confused with that ground within. Brian.
How about aim as ground?
Your aim will probably come from your ground, yeah. So for you, for instance, your aim is building your business. And we would ask, what about your business do you think is important enough for you to put that amount of energy and admittedly some suffering into to get it happening? And that will point at your ground.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It does.
I remember what I wanted to talk about too. Yeah, I think someone was talking about how do I know whether I'm just gonna use the metaphor of like God, right? How do I know if my connection to God is because it is this culturally inculcated thing that I have decided to slap the label of my ground on because that seems contextually appropriate and it seems to work for me. So I'll just go with that and everything will be cool, as opposed to it being something that you've chosen for yourself. Well, I think one exercise we can do is think about, well, what would I be like without it? What if I decided, just as a mental exercise, to imagine if no one else were around and I were on my own, what would I be like if I didn't hold this to be my truth, my ground, whatever? And that can take some practice, especially if you're really in that construct.
Another way to deal with that is to ask yourself, what would happen if I took away all of the trappings of religion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would happen if I couldn't pray 5 times a day, if I couldn't fast, if I couldn't pay zakat, if I couldn't follow the sunnah, if I couldn't do any of this stuff? Take away all of that, and how do you feel about God?
Yeah, what remains?
Yeah.
What sticks? What feels real at that point? What feels resonant?
And that's going to give you a pretty decent answer, I think. Then you can do all of that stuff, and it's fun.
Right, and then it's a choice as opposed to like, well, I do it because I'm freaked out that I'm gonna get zapped by a thunderbolt from the sky if I don't do it, or my parents will disown me, or whatever.
Government will kill me here. All of that kind of stuff.
Yusuf from Turkey asks, does ground have something to do with Esma? How would you define that for the unfortunately ignorant among us? I can't remember what that word means.
It is also difficult for me.
Yeah.
So the names of God, they are also embedded in each one of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, yeah, it's, as I said, it's very difficult for explaining it
Yeah.
in English for me.
So if you were,
but
if you were to pronounce that Nur in Arabic rather than Turkish, it would be more like Asma, as in Asma al-Hunsa, right? The highest names.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the ground, the thing we have to find our basement. I thought it is something about the asthma in us, which names are.
That's actually a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for those who identify with this way of looking at the world that is so common to Sufism and to many Muslims, like that sense that we are the divine made flesh, right? We are a creation of the divine. We are a manifestation, as I've said before, of that divine created energy put into this material realm in order to have an engagement with this material realm that a diffuse energetic essence is not quite able to have. We are still connected to the divine. We still are the divine, despite the trappings of this world. And we come from that and we return to that, as is said. So we can trust that it will always be there, that it is always part of us, that it's a constant underlying all of the things that seem so transient and temporary in the world around us. For some people, that would work. That would be a great ground for them. I don't know if that was exactly what you were getting at, Yusuf. Okay, I'm glad that was somewhat helpful, yes. Bonnie says, is surrender the best way to move on from the point of guilt?
From the pain.
From the...
Excuse me, no, I have something in my way. Yeah, it's halfway over the word, so I guess point of guilt.
Yes.
And it's one way. Again, this becomes very personal. Surrender is one way that might work. Action is another way that might work. Guilt demands that you do not be passive. If you are passive, the guilt gets worse. It's like, oh, I surrender to this guilt. And then you don't do anything about it. You have not actualized the thing that your essence is nagging you about. It will just nag louder. So surrender to the idea that you have to take action, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Surrender to the fact that this thing really seems to matter to you or be relevant to you. And that getting around it does not seem to be working.
Yeah. And realize, and this is important, you might want to take notes on this. Nobody can tell you what you should do at this level. you come to me and I say, oh, you're experiencing this guilt, you must do this. That might be the wrong thing to do. Only you can know the answer. And again, if somebody tells you otherwise, they're probably trying to sell you something. Yeah. Wanting an answer from outside yourself is dangerous.
I think it's, as you would agree, Mushtaq, like it's obviously okay to ask for help and support, as it is in any case where we are afraid or questioning, but the answer ultimately has to come from yourself.
Yeah. And it's important to realize that nobody can give you that answer. I mean, somebody can say, oh, sure, say there's no God but God, pray 5 times a day, pay the poor tax, etc., go on Hajj to Mecca. And that might not do it for you. I know this is heresy. But
Yeah.
just
Yes,
being told, just being told that is not going to address the problem of meaning. You might find meaning in that, but you'll find the meaning first. And you may find the meaning in something totally different than that, and that has to be okay.
So, Bonnie.
Yeah, so it just sounds like this is the point where we get stuck, can get stuck, and although we need to figure it out on our own, I think we need help with this stage.
Oh, sure, we need help, but you have to realize that the buck stops with you. I remember there was this one guru out of India who used to say, does your mind bother you? Give it to me. It won't bother me. And I thought, boy, there is a recipe for disaster there.
True. True. But I'd rather book a session with you guys. I need help with this.
We all need
Give you
help.
help, but we won't tell you what to do. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Right.
And Khalil has a question, or at least he has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that there's nothing on the Enneagram of anxiety, that the thing I'm most anxious about of all, which is pain and suffering. Where does that fit in? Evil?
Probably. I mean, that would be where I would put it.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you may have noticed that pain feels pretty damn evil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's my experience of it. You know, when I am in agonizing pain, for me, that's evil.
Yeah, I mean, it frustrates our efforts to do the things that we really feel strongly about doing.
I mean, in a way, it just seems like pain is the all-encompassing outer circle that connects everything. I mean, there's pain at the anxiety over the suffering that's going to entail from each of the points is what we're really anxious about.
Mm.
Yeah. That's an interesting point of view, and probably one worth exploring. You should even write a paper on it.
Well, I'm just going back to the first noble truth. I mean, the Buddha said, life is pain. And it's like, yeah, and that's what we get anxious about because we
Yeah.
desire, our suffering comes from desiring not to have that pain. And that's
Mhm.
all connected to every point on the circle.
A thought just came to me. I wonder, I mean, this is arguable. It's just a thought, but the physical pain, stuff having to do with the body, I wonder if that might fall under death.
It can.
Yeah. Like for me, as someone who also experiences pain, it's like an anxiety about decay. It's about being stopped from being able to move forward. It's about realizing that some things are out of my reach and that they're a no-go zone and that I have to accept that. So this idea of limitation and fragility and learning how to value beauty and whatever is possible and whatever is accessible in light of what is not. So I don't know. I mean,
Well, just yeah, from a Buddhist perspective, suffering is the resistance to any pain, and that creates anxiety. So
yeah,
anytime we're unwilling to go completely through any of these experiences on the Enneagram of anxiety, we're going to experience anxiety because we're reluctant to endure the experience that we don't want to go through, and that generates suffering.
yes. I want to reiterate though that there is a difference between the existential chafing that we all experience, which in this case we're calling anxiety, and then there's the anxiety of the machine, which is the resistance, the panic, the oh my god, I don't want to do this. Ew, no, I'm just not even going to look at it, or the getting lost in the like it's so huge and I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a double layered reality happening here in a sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
And yeah, I think there's some thought to be some room for thinking about how pain fits into this.
Yeah, there's room for thinking about a lot of stuff because this is, our first crafting of this actually.
Yeah, I mean, this is like our beta version. I mean,
Yeah.
sort of. Yeah.
I
So,
wish that I could claim this was ancient esoteric truth that I had gathered from scrolls high in the Himalayas, but it's not.
mm.
Most of this came from my old philosophy teacher. And that I figured out that 47 years ago, we were working on this.
Yep. James says, I think Frankel's logotherapy provides some degree of guidance here. Do you want
Probably.
to expand on that, James? I don't have a lot of knowledge about that. So I wonder if you might briefly describe.
Well, in this context, because Frankel didn't prescribe meanings to his clients, he said what, but he felt that a meaning that would unlock your will to endure life, whatever you want to call it, tend to be in three spheres to either expand the bounds of human knowledge, performance, and capacity, um, to endure an unavoidable suffering and demonstrate qualities of the spirit, or to truly love someone, to actually see someone and devote oneself to their true objective well-being. As guides in the exploration of personal meaning, I think those are three pointers. And his whole thing, I don't know anyone wherever he was interned in one of the Nazi camps, went in as a kind of a Freudian, came out as quite different. He felt that the people who came out of the camps with their humanity intact, with people who had some meaning beyond personal gratification and biosurvival,
Mm-hmm.
the political and religious prisoners and so forth. Um, so there's something there of to some degree of some use and applicability.
I agree, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Thanks, James. Who have we not heard from? Lavita, how are you doing?
Listening anxiously.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you're here. Alka, how about you? We haven't heard much from you this evening. I don't know if you're able to speak. Maybe you're in a place that's a little hectic right now.
No, sorry, something is wrong with my phone today. This was very heavy. I have written a lot of notes, and uh, I only had one question about the death when we were talking about all the steps and the avoidance of this keeps us stuck. But I have a little different experience. Can you actually imagine your death to be beautiful and look forward to it all the time? What would that be? Because
That
that's
would
more
be
my experience.
imagining your death to be beautiful and looking forward to it. Here's an axiom. Nobody can die your death for you. And however you do it, is the correct way to do it. So
Okay.
if that's how you approach it, that's what's right for you.
Yeah, okay. One time I did some this exercise called it's the shavasana. Actually, it's like
Yeah,
it's an
familiar with
asana.
it. Little of the old
Oh,
corkscrews.
right. But this individual teacher could actually bring you to that point where you see your own death. He was actually very funny the way he said it. He's like, you may see angels if you believe in it, or you may see gods. He has not been able to figure that out, why that happens, like why individuals see what they see, but you may see it. And it was interesting. I saw my death very beautiful. It was very real. And when I came out of that asana, it has taken that fear of death away from me. That was a question that can you imagine your death to be beautiful? So that's not also another kind of a stuck point, like you get stuck in it, right?
Could be.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when I was listening to you. That could also be another point of being stuck, right? Just in a different way of coming to it.
I think that can be a way of coping with the anxiety of the machine, especially. You know, it's kind of like you develop a relationship with death in which you aren't ruled by the panic and the insecurity. But at the same time, the anxiety of death is that we don't know when it's coming, and it is coming. And we can only be so prepared for that, even if we have an attitude of welcome and of acceptance.
Yeah, and the same exact experience can affect two people totally differently.
Yeah.
One of
And
my favorite lines from the Spandakarika is the same experience that awakens the yogi enslaves the common man.
Very deep. Very deep.
thanks, Alka.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
me being a slave to my stomach,
Is it dinner time?
it's getting on
All
towards
right.
dinner time.
Yeah, I just want to touch base with Zainab. What do you have any thoughts you might like to add before we say goodbye, Zainab?
No, thank you.
No. She's saying go eat, be free. All right.
Every video ends with Mustaq saying he wants food. One day he has to give us that food, whatever he eats. He has to cook for us.
God willing, I would
I'll
love
cook for
that.
you guys anytime. Come on over.
We have a little room. We can
Yeah.
host. Yeah. All right. So, thank you everyone for
Switch over to Brady
Brady
Bunch.
Bunch mode.
Yeah.
Look at all these beautiful people.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for joining us for our second part of this grappling with anxiety.
And next week is our Two Talk Sunday, right?
Yes, next Sunday is our Two Talk Sunday, the third Sunday of the month.
For one of our Two Talks, probably the morning one. So those of you who are up late can actually catch it without as much trouble. We're going to do a talk on objective magic. Ooh.
Buzzy. Yes. Okay, so that's going to be, we have our 10:30 a.m. Pacific time session, and then we have our usual 6:30 p.m. Pacific time session, and this is all next Sunday.
Yeah.
So hopefully some of you can join us. Maybe all of you will be there. That would be exciting. In the meantime, James, maybe? All right, we'll see. Well, take care this week. Please don't let current events drive you too crazy. Figure out what helps you stay grounded, especially during times like this. That can be helpful. But in the meantime, we wish you well, and we can wave to each other. Wave to everybody watching on the replay. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.